Hey, folks, welcome to Bouncing Brains. I'm Sean Hatfield.
And I'm Freddy G. Today we have a special guest in the studio, Victor Parlatto, poet and all-around asshole.
All around.
All around, buddy.
I mean, the poet can come in and out. I mean, it all depends.
Are
on the
you sure
readings.
just the poet comes in and out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The asshole comes naturally. I think. I mean, I almost did come out of an asshole, so let's put it that way.
I
Okay.
think if anybody ever started talking to me about the whole poets are just emotional, sensitive people, be
Yeah.
like, motherfucker, read some Bukowski.
Yeah, read some Bukowski. Get to know Victor. Victor, I think it's kind of funny because when I first started working at IBC, like as I jump from job to job, everybody always thinks, "Oh, you write poetry. You must be real nice and very emotional." And then they get to know me and they're like, "You're just a sex fiend. You're just in it for the pussy at this point."
It's funny, man, that you say that because I think me and Sean experience the same thing as comedians. I don't know about you, but I personally hate it because the people that have found out at my job that I'm a comic, they automatically assume
You must be funny.
no, but the bad thing is that they assume that you must be funny all the time.
All the time.
Like,
you
they're-
can't
they're-
have one depressing moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's exactly the same way where like everything that comes out of my mouth must be poetic. Must have some profile. Like, why did you say that?
Yeah,
I'm just saying it.
exactly.
Yeah, I get that.
And I hate the two things I hate. One is, hey, so tell me a joke. Fuck, I hate that shit, bro. Like, really, like.
No, see, and that's because we were talking about one of the other poets. See, I never knew about open mics. So when I first started going into the whole open mic scene, it was with the comedians. Like I just kind of went into that crowd, and they originally, like, I brought it up to, what was his name? The original host for Cine El Rey?
Mark Pena?
Mark Pena. I had originally brought it up to him. I was like, hey, I would like to do the open mic. And he's like, well, you can. It's just you have to understand, we've normally never had poets. Like, we've normally always had comedians. And I told him, like, you know what? Perfect. Let's go with that. I want to see if I can be funny at least in my poetry. Because before, I wasn't that funny.
Dude, you have two poems that are hilarious.
Yeah. No,
They're
I've had
fucking
some.
hilarious. I forgot the titles. I gotta be honest.
Well, most people do, but most people. I think the people that I meet, whenever they see me in my readings, after a while of not seeing them, they've always said, "Hey, I really like that poem that started and or ended like this." They never remember the title. I think the only one people remember is the big one. It was about an ex-girlfriend of mine.
Is that the one with the cum slap?
No.
Fuck!
No,
that's my favorite, bro.
No, but that one's good.
Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah.
I've got a joke like that. No, I'm kidding.
Nah, and see, the funny thing about that poem is that half of it is true. See, okay, here's my hidden talent, and I think comedians can relate to this.
Okay.
You get somebody's experience. Like, let's say if you tell me a story, my dilemma in my life, and I think it's more of a sadistic mentality that I have, is that I always put myself in everybody's story.
Yeah.
Like, I'm the main character of everybody's story. So
Yeah.
like, if you tell me a story about your ex-wife, or if you were to do anything, like tell me a story, any story, I would immediately put myself as the main character, and I would think that that's my story now, and everything around that is my premise.
I see.
So, like,
exactly what you're saying.
I kind of, that's how some of my poetry begins, is that I turn it into like half experience and half what do you call it? Improvision,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, that poem, half of it is because I heard it from somebody, and then the other half is because, well, improv.
I see. And it works. It honestly works. The other fucking thing I hate is when the opposite. Cause I'm a sarcastic asshole, bro. That's just the way I'm wired. Like, ever since I was a kid, my mouth got me in trouble. Right? So the other thing I hate is when I'm not trying to be funny, but I am being sarcastic. Like, very sarcastic. And then I'll say some shit, and they're like, that wasn't funny. Work on it a little more. Bitch, I was not trying to be funny. That's sarcasm, all right? And I hate that. It's like, you should work on it a little more, you know?
Yeah.
Mother-
like you go into your hey, I'm a comedian, and then you start talking. They're like, well, you're not that funny.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're not trying to
Yeah,
say a
you're-
joke at that point. You're just like having a normal conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it sucks. And that's partly the reason why sometimes I refuse to.
You obscure it.
Yeah, like I don't. When I meet new people, I don't tell them I'm a poet.
Yeah.
I don't
Me
tell
too.
them.
I learned.
I've learned from my mistakes is I don't bring up anything about what I do. I just, if it unfolds, it unfolds. You know.
I just tell them entertainment
Yeah.
now.
Yeah,
Like,
it's easier that way.
simpler as fuck, man.
Because, yeah, I mean, comedians have it rougher though, in my opinion, because you have to think like. You have your on stage persona, which is perfect, but then you get off the stage, and you have your off stage persona. It's like two personalities. You're just kind of like jumping between the two. Like you meet people that you've met and at open mics, and you don't know whether you should be your normal self or your comedian self, because there are two different points. Because you can't be funny all the time, but you also can't be. You know, yourself, unless your natural self is
to
funny.
take this back to like someone like Bukowski, and there are other examples, none that are popping to mind, which lets you know how much poetry I read on a regular basis. But with Bukowski, man, a lot of the times, at least towards some of his early stuff is just vitriolic.
Rambling.
Yeah, well, he's still letting off all that steam from working
Yeah.
in the post office for 25 years or whatever.
Well, see, and here's the thing: a lot of people don't know about Bukowski. Is that his life usually trails back to he was born, I believe, 1922, 1920, somewhere between the 29, somewhere around. So roughly around the Great Depression. So you have a man who essentially wanted to be successful in a career that at that time was not a solid career.
Right.
Writers weren't a thing that you if you wanted to be successful, you had to be something in business, you know, something that had a stable job. And if you ever read some of his early work, and I'm talking, of course, because Bukowski, they know him now for his poetry, and that's partially true. But in his early years, I want to say like between the age of 20 to 30, he actually did short stories.
I've never read any of short stories.
Yeah. Bukowski was very, very popular for his short stories. I shouldn't say popular. He was well known for his short stories. He was also well known for always sending short stories to publishers and never getting approved. None of them got approved in any magazine. He never got published. So he spent that good time just practicing his art, crafting it, creating his own style, writing short stories, and then eventually he just kind of didn't give up, but he became silent. He stopped sending out work, but he was starting to do this whole method of typing up poems. So his early work, and I believe it's a yellow book. I have it. Rooming houses, madhouses, something like that. Those are his early typed up poems, and if you ever go through them, it sounds like rambling. It's just an old man ranting on a typewriter because he just discovered his own style of writing. Because here you have a guy who had the structure of prose and then said, you know what, I'm gonna invent my own line breaks. I'm gonna do my own poetry style, and he just started breaking down lines without any reason, no style, and a lot of people want to say that he's the sole reason why there's such a thing now as free verse, even though free verse back then was always considered, there was always a popular thing,
right?
But he kind of reinvented it.
Well, free verse is a weird thing. I've always I've dabbled in poetry every once in a while, but I'm a much more
style
lyrical. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm a fan of spoken poetry in the. I mean, basically, you're taking it a step down from singing almost. It's, the rhyme scheme itself is almost the melody that you're following.
And see, a lot of people like the lyrical because it challenges. See, the whole thing with free verse is that anybody can do it. It becomes more of a thing where if you just sit down, take a piece of paper, and write down any sentence, break it down with some line breaks, you have a poem, according to poetry, with the free verse. And
I'll be honest, I push back a little bit against that because I have come across some folks that just they've abandoned all sense of
lyrical.
Well, not just that, but okay, with free verse, I've often tried to picture it as rather than trying to rhyme with syllables, what you're basically doing is putting the thoughts out there in a rhythmic pattern. You know what I mean? Like you were saying, the line breaks with Bukowski, where it's like this thought and that thought resonates, and then the next thought.
The next, yeah.
You know
And see, and that's where a lot of people don't, or a lot of poets, or a lot of new poets. I mean, even myself, when I first started writing poetry, I remember I would just always put line breaks on everything. And it works to an extent.
Right.
Because at that point, it's like you said, it's all about syllables. Then it falls into how long a sentence is, how you end the sentence, what's more important to the actual sentence, this word, or these three words. And then you start kind of seeing sentences differently. There's actually a writer who came out with a book on how to write, and his entire book is essentially a free verse style poem. He just breaks down every sentence into tiny little sentences, and he tells you, look, if you have to essentially create a long sentence to say one simple idea, that's too complicated of a sentence.
Right.
Because sure, sentences, words are supposed to, woo the women, woo the people, make armies stronger with mere motivation.
That's always seemed to be the quintessential point of poetry to me, was the you're tapping into an emotional aspect.
So I have a question real quick, going back to a couple sentences ago that you said where you inserted your breaks when you write your poetry. So just real quick backdrop for the people listening and maybe the ones even in the room that don't know. I'm a poet. I started writing poetry before I even did comedy. Fun fact. Yeah. So
I think there are probably more people out there who have written poetry than they care to admit to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other fun fact is that I actually do have a published book on sale on Amazon.
I think you told me about that one.
I don't promote it much because it was one of my biggest failures. But if you want to go check it out, it's called Broken Dreams. You can find it on Amazon.
At least you can be in a bar and use the line, "I'm a poet. I'm a published poet."
Yeah. There you go. See, there you go.
I can't even say that. And I've been writing for almost 10 years.
Yeah. So my question is, I had a lot of poems where I also inserted breaks. The way I used my breaks was there's two poems that I can remember. One was called "The Soul in the Tree," and the other one was called "My Soul Eats." Right? So in those poems, it was very important for me to use breaks because, in a sense, I was telling a story, right? And I used the breaks to end a rhyme, to end a point of the story, and to jump into a completely different subject, but that's still connected to the previous paragraph that I wrote. Right? So that's how I used my breaks, in a sense. When you used your breaks, how was it that, like, what did you use them for?
Well, that's a little tricky because if you ever read some of my poetry, you'll see that some of them don't have any rhyme or reason to them when it comes to the breaks. And then when I do see the way my brain sees words now, or the way that since I started because when I first started writing, period, I would do short stories. I would write. Essentially, I was I don't know what you would call them. Does anybody remember an old video? Well, I think it's still popular today. RuneScape.
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I used to be one of those people that would sit against a wall in the game, and it was me. It was before chat rooms, and we would all
Yeah.
we would all be in that little game, and we would you know swoo ideas and try and create a story out of nothing, and everybody would contribute their part, but then my part was always, I'm going to contribute mine. Now here's the problem.
Okay.
On RuneScape, you didn't have the benefit of being able to type an entire paragraph and then pressing enter. You had to do everything in short bursts.
Yeah.
So what I would do is I would type as quickly as I possibly can, put the most like powerful sentence out there, and then type up the next one quickly. So in the chat, or essentially in the game or in the chat, I was creating these stories for 4 people, and all of them had to chime in on their own way. Mm-hmm. So you can only imagine that I'm there on my laptop. Just imagine like a 16, 17-year-old, no, younger than that, typing away as quickly as he can with the story in his head, but I can't proofread it. I can't edit it.
Yeah.
I can't do anything to it.
Yeah.
I have to as quickly as it's coming to me. I have to get it out, right?
Yeah.
So since then, I've always had that mechanism just going in my head. Is I typed a sentence, break it off, send it off, right?
Yeah.
So everybody's seeing the sentence, and before the sentence can even end, I already have the next one coming in. So I just got used to typing really fast.
Yeah.
So then when I started writing, long term, as in like now I could actually sit down and type a short story.
Yeah.
Because now we had actual chat rooms that we would meet in. I think it was called some website. I don't even remember the name of the website. But we would be there, and it would be like all 5 of us just sitting there, and I could actually type up the entire paragraph now. I didn't feel comfortable. It was out of my element.
Yeah.
For a moment, I couldn't write.
Because I think, well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think us as writers, whether you're a comic or a poet or whatever, when you get used to writing like anything, but in a certain way, and then you're pushed out of that element, whatever it is, like again, as a writer, it impacts you.
Yeah.
Even when you say, no, I'm cool, I can adjust, I can adapt, you probably can, but at the beginning, it's like a shock. It's like a writer's shock.
Mm. So then, of course, in the chat room, you don't want to see a bunch of sentences going up like crazy. Like that's just considered spamming.
Yeah.
So I got used to the whole paragraph. I had to write these actual short stories in actual formats and make them work. And then one day, I don't know. Well, I know why. I had a breakup, and a friend of my brother passed a book to me and said, "Hey, you should read this guy. I think you'll like him, Charles Bukowski." And it was Love is a Dog from Hell. Now, back then, you have to understand, I loved writing, I loved typing, but I always thought everything had to have style. I never, ever in my mind thought that the way that I typed back in that game could actually be that there were actually people that type like that. So,
okay,
I was reading Bukowski, and I see that he's just putting line breaks. Of course, he's using rhythm in his words, so he's using powerful sentences and then breaking it off. Or sometimes, if you go through it and you count the syllables, they don't even make sense. You sit there trying to figure out, why did he put a line break there? Or why did he do this? Why did he do that? You see the point because it's a poem. The poem has a point because he's explaining a story and it has the ending to it in the beginning, and he's bringing it to a. Yeah. It's essentially like a joke. It's a punchline at the end.
Yeah.
But that was the whole joke to his poetry, is that he didn't want to use style, and then I'm reading this and I'm thinking, well, the way that I used to type can actually be used as poetry. Yeah. So I started seeing a new way of poetry. I saw a way outside of Shakespearean poetry or lyrical poetry, because you have English teachers that want you to write poetry and they teach you all these styles and everything. And I mean, I didn't like it. It didn't suit me. I tried the whole rhyme thing and I tried it drastically with the syllables, and I don't know. It just whenever I would read it to myself, I felt like I was coming off very cliche, because it's just, I don't know. It was just the way I feel like my voice would change, or these everything. So
Well,
Just to jump in there real quick, I think a lot of English teachers that do teach poetry are trying to teach their students poetry and want them to write poetry are doing themselves a bit of disservice, because I mean these are the same people that we want to teach. The kids must have proper grammar and proper punctuation and all this, and it's like, to be honest, I found much more joy in poetry, songwriting, even free verse, prose type of stuff, when I, dropped syllables, colloquialisms, slang, jargon, the things that would not be considered, proper English. So if you presented this in an English class, it'd be like, well, you dropped the G off of this word. And it's like, well, because it's not supposed to, when I speak this out loud, it will not have the G. And if it's spoken that way, it flows.
yeah, and I remember this, my English teacher in senior. Well, I had him senior and sophomore year. He used to tell me that grammar was the most important thing, but he also taught me in senior year that if you figure out how to use grammar, you can figure out how to break the rules of grammar. In other words,
That's
dropping
fair
the
point.
Yeah.
like you can. There are people that will sit there and be like, oh, you used a semicolon wrong. But then if you understand why you broke that rule,
Right,
you're allowed to do it.
Yeah.
And that's where most good poetry starts. Is it starts when you read it out to a group of people. It sounds good. It sounds like a good old sentence. But then when you read it to yourself, it looks almost beautiful, because the person who wrote it understood what he was doing with the whole grammar. He was using grammar as a sense of style.
Yeah.
Putting semicolons here, dashes here, and it was in your mind. You're reading it as if it was an actual thing from your own mind. It's
Well,
very-
the thing is a lot of points I want to touch on from what both of you said. I was taught, when you begin to write, because I also wrote lyrics and I recorded music and whatnot. But something that I remember, somebody that taught me when I was in LA, shout out to Daryl Swan, the Musicians Institute. He's probably not listening to this shit, but in case he is, yeah, Daryl Swan. I still remember him, and he taught me that when you're a performer, whether it be poetry, comedy, or a musician, and you write your own lyrics, you're not supposed to write. Let me see how I'm trying to say this. You're not supposed to write the way you speak, because when you write it exactly the way you would speak it in a conversation, and then you go on stage and you perform it or in front of people, it's not gonna come out the same. It's gonna sound shitty, and the point that you were initially trying to put out, it's not gonna be. You have a more of a chance of people not understanding you the way you wanted them to understand you. So he always said, when you're gonna perform something, this is exactly what he said. He said, when you're writing to perform something on stage, and you know that there's gonna be a performance behind it, like, grammar goes out the window. But just because grammar went out the window, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. Like it's okay. And he lived by the quote that he said, musicians don't, grammar does not apply to musicians. Well, because he was a musician, but like to everything else, comedy or poetry. And the same thing in my book, there was a lot of, I remember when I wrote my first draft that I was going to turn it in, I gave it to an editor and they read it. And this is how I knew when the editor did not know what the fuck he was talking about. Because the first thing he docked me on was a bunch of misspelled words. But they were misspelled words on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of breaking.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of for. He was really against me writing a for instead of the word
FOR.
FOR. He was really against and this was when I wrote, because I wrote my first draft. instead of the eye, I actually drew an actual eyeball at the beginning of the sentence, and that's how it started. I, and then and I still remember the sentence. It started, "I am looking," but instead of me putting an I put an actual I, and he was like, "Dude, like nobody's gonna want to read that."
Well, I mean,
You do
That's-
set yourself up, I think, when you get a little too stylized with stuff. And I found myself doing this as well with a few things where you can find those that, like, the people that are going to appreciate it are really going to appreciate it. But the folks that can't quite, if they can't foment the thought process in that kind of pattern, then it puts them right the fuck off.
Yeah.
I mean, even if they would enjoy, say, hearing the piece spoken out loud, I think there's that break with language. You ever tried to read some of Mark Twain's more denser material?
no, but I think I have one of his books, and it has him in the front cover, which I mistake them for. Because I had never read Mark Twain, and now I don't know the name of the book, which is horrible of me, but I know it's the only Mark Twain book that I have, and if you look it up and you find it, I think you'll know what I'm talking about. I think he's staring into the camera, and he's smiling, and he kind of looks like that actor, the old actor from Batman, the butler.
Oh,
Okay.
Alfred, yeah, he looks like the actor that played Alfred, and I was like, what the fuck? Did Alfred publish a book or what? No, but no. I've read some of his older stuff, but never his most complicated stuff.
The thing with Twain is he literally writes not only how he speaks, though usually when he's kind of putting down his own thoughts, if he throws in what's the word? I know there's a proper word for that when you put an accent onto something. You know what I mean? Like you were saying about breaking instead of breaking, you throw the little comma or the apostrophe at the end to denote that. I know there's a phrase for that, but I don't know what it is. But when he does that when he's speaking in his voice in his writings, and he does that, it's usually to denote an emotional point in it. But when he writes, say, characters, if you ever go back and read Huckleberry Finn, it's filled with these, like, the characters are speaking, and if you're not, like, it's very proper English, and then they said, and then the quote comes up, and you're like, what the fuck is that? And you almost have to get your mind into that. You have to hear the character's voice in your head, or it will not.
And not a lot of writers are good at that.
Right.
And I think a lot of like when it comes to my writing, I try really hard for dialogue to have a very unique. That's why every time I go up to a stage, I always tell them, like, I'm gonna try really hard on the dialogue today, like to try and imitate the voices.
And you do, and might I add, I'm not saying it just because he's sitting next to me, but you actually do very well when it comes to
because that's one of the hardest things when you're reading poetry is you don't want the crowd to have to figure out, is he talking as himself, or is he the woman in the story, or is he the woman?
That's something that's pretty much a 1-to-1 comparison with comedy. If you start doing
the same thing
characters.
happens with short stories. And like you said, Mark Twain did it well, and a lot of other writers did it well, where they were able to write the way they write, but then once they get to the dialogue, they put their own twist. The way the person these people are unique. Now I'll tell you why. They have an ear for language.
Mm-hmm.
So take a person like me. I watch people talk, and the way I see people talk, I try and see it in my head like subtitles. Like I try so hard, really. It's become more of and my girlfriend tells me that it's a bad habit, because she says, you're always somewhere else, but you're never here. You're always somewhere else in your mind, but you're never here, like we go on a date, and I'm always just listening to people's conversations, or I'm watching the people sitting down next to us, and I'm watching them, but in the context of I'm watching them and then putting words above them, like everything the lady's doing, I'm writing it in my head. I'm like, okay.
My wife used to tell me the same thing, because
because it's good practice. It's
yeah,
good.
not only that, but like I was always writing in my. But see, me, I look like a crazy person, and I do understand that because I was always writing shit in my head, right? And then when I would come up, we all know like when you stumble upon a punchline, and you see the premise playing out in front of you, it makes you laugh. So I sometimes I would laugh like randomly. And then she's like,
and this is where a lot of people think comedians, musicians, poets, performers, oh, they must be geniuses because how else would they come up with this? But I like to see this as a way that the muses are setting up the play for you.
Yeah.
It's just a matter if you're paying attention to what they're putting in front of you. They're playing essentially, they're doing a play for you. They're saying, here's what you can write about. I'm not going to give you the inspiration. I want you to catch it for yourself and see what you turn this into.
And
because imagine if we're in the same room.
Yeah.
Imagine now we're watching the same thing play out in front of us, but you have a different outlook,
a different point of view. You're different. You're looking at it from a different angle than what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And those two angles are going to give you two distinctive outlooks and points of views on the same thing. I got you. It's like I've had people.
It's like that. It's like that old joke. What happens when a writer, comedian, and musician walk into a bar?
What happens?
I don't know. That's never happened in my life.
I was actually waiting there.
That's never actually happened. I don't think I've ever known a musician and poet
we need to work on that then. Shit. No, but people have actually told me like dude, that was so funny. Like that was so funny. How did you how were you able to formulate that? And it's kind of sad because I tell everybody the same thing. Dude, like, these are my real experiences. And then when I tell them that that's what I really went through, they don't believe me. It's like, that can't happen.
And see, that also happens with English teachers. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but have you ever written a paper, excuse me, and you're sitting there, it's getting graded, and the teacher comes back and tells you, you didn't write this shit. You didn't write this shit. This is not the way you talk.
Yeah.
This is not the way you talk. Look at the way this sentence is. I know how. It's like, for example, me. You read my poetry, you're going to think, wow, this guy must be an asshole. Or he must talk like a fucking brute or something. Yeah. But then you get to know me and you're like, you realize that English. Okay, fun fact for everybody that's listening and for the two people in this room. English was not my first language.
I knew that.
Yeah, Spanish was. Both my parents are Spanish speaking, Latinos. My dad's from, now get this, my dad's from Mexico City. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine a chilango, as they would call them. They have very strong accent when it comes to the
really
Spanish.
Strong.
Yeah, and he talks really fast. So I'm listening. And I can, if I ever talk Spanish, if you ever, dude, it comes out exactly like that. It comes out
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, and then you also have my mom, who was born in Reynosa, but then came over here. So you have a woman who converted her Spanish to English, but then also goes back and forth. Growing up, all I have ever heard was Spanish. The only English I ever heard was from TV. So the way I learned English between 2nd to 4th grade was from TV, cartoons. So I picked that up, and that's what I imitate. Fun fact again, whenever I watch a movie and they have a very distinct accent, for like 30 minutes after the movie, my accent's exactly the same way. I replicate everything about the movie.
That's crazy. But like, you don't do it on purpose, you're saying?
No. The accents, no. That comes out in its own nature, which is weird because sometimes I'll come out of the movie and I'll feel like exactly like the main character. Like I said, I always put myself in the story. So, like in the movie Transformers, Shia LaBeouf, I was Shia LaBeouf. I was saving the Autobots. I was the one saving all the world. But see, that's the thing is that I've always put myself in the story of everything that I've watched, everything I've heard. Yeah. I put myself in that situation. So I walked out of that movie theater. I remember I watched the movie and I walked out and I thought everything for the first 30 minutes was exactly like Transformers. And I had watched Transformers, I think, Dark Side of the Moon. But you know, they copyright because of Pink Floyd. They didn't want to put Dark Side of the Moon, so they put Dark of the Moon. But anyways, I watched that movie so many times that I can actually do what's his name? Optimus Prime voice perfectly. And I've seen enough
you can do it now?
I can do it right now on the spot. I can also do I can do
You're not gonna walk out of here until you do it, but
yeah,
okay, go ahead.
I can do Bane from Dark Knight
Oh shit.
perfectly. 2, 3. I can do who's that? It's because my dad used to watch him when I was a kid.
It brings me to my next point, but finish it because there's something I've been wanting to tell you.
The James I'm Sean Connery. That guy.
Yeah.
Sean Connery. I can do his voice, which is just a modified version of Bane's voice. Because Bane's voice, get this, is Sean Connery's voice, but in a higher pitch. So if I just do, I'm Sean Connery, and then I change it and I go, I'm Bane. Good afternoon, Batman. Did everybody get that?
Holy fuck, yeah.
So if I were to like just put a mask over, I am Gotham's reckoning.
I don't think a lot of people catch that when they listen to voices. There's not only accent, there's inflection.
Yeah. So then that's why I got into the habit of I want to see if how many different accents I can do. So I remember for this one poem which I never read up on stage because somebody said it would be very out of disrespect because the voice in the poem is actually a smoker voice.
Yeah.
And I can do a perfect like, good afternoon. I'm John. I know. So I have every voice locked in my head. I want to always do it, but it's just I have to sit in front of that voice for a while to get it. Like,
to get it, and you pick it up.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, Autobots roll out.
That's awesome. Which brings me to my next point. When I saw you perform, I believe for the third time, and it was the first time that I saw you perform at Yerberia, right? Mm-hmm. So, anyway, point being is you actually did one of your poems that required interactive dialogue. You were playing two characters. Poem was awesome. I'm not even talking about that. My point is that when I heard those two poems, I've been wanting to tell you, man, why haven't you ever done or looked into doing
voice acting?
Voice over? You would be perfect, bro. And it pays a shitload of money.
I don't think I don't think anybody's ever walked up with the opportunity of like, hey Vic, you want to do a voiceover for one of my characters?
Well, I was going that way, and I know who to get you in contact if you're ever looking for work.
Yeah,
I've auditioned, but
yeah, I mean,
I didn't get it.
Like I said, if I sit there long enough, read the character, I can hear the voice in my head. That's not the problem. The problem is sometimes I do the voice so much or the character so well that I become that character for that moment. I don't know if you've ever it's only ever happened a couple times, but like there are moments where I'll read a poem and I become so invested in the poem. I do the character so well that when I get off the stage, I'm sweating, drenched in sweat.
Yeah.
I'm sweating so much because my thought process, it's like my mind was trying to tell me, like, you're becoming this person at this point. Like, you are this person. But my body doesn't want to accept it. Yeah. It's like, it's borderline.
But I think it happens to every creator. Like anybody, I think anybody that has any kind of artistic talent, you as a poet, Sean as a comic, we battle that. Like it's you feel like you're good at one thing. Like you're one type of poem. You're one type of poet that can do different types of poems or whatever. But you're very good at that one thing. But because you're very good at it, sometimes we feel like we're not good enough. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think every creator.
Well, it comes with a price, man. I've seen writers walking around while they've been working on stuff, and they've just got this blank look on their face. They're bumping into shit, and it's like, on part of you wants to just shake them and be like, "Man, get your shit together." But on the other hand, it's like, "No, I get it, man. You're you're multitasking, which is not real. You don't really multitask.
You don't really multitask. Like people see you. Like I know when I'm at work, people are like, Victor, you rarely ever do anything. Like, why you always have like this? You're always just walking around. You're always in your own little world. And I'm like, it's because I'm multitasking in my head. The way I'm seeing things is I'm reading the terrain. I'm trying to find that immortal line, that one line that I know will stick out of all of the other lines. Right. And I think that's where we always end up, is that we get caught up in our own world, in our own thoughts. Mm-hmm. And we're always trying to up the last great thing. Like for comedians, it could be the last joke that we said, in the last performance. You said this joke and it got a great, reaction out of everybody. Right. And then next week you're like, well, shit, I have to one up that one guy. And that one guy is yourself. So how do you one up yourself? Yeah. It's difficult, which is why I'm always writing poetry, always constantly trying to find something. I think I even wrote a poem about getting a ticket once. Right. And so my best friend had told me, like, that wasn't a great poem. Then I read it a year later and everybody liked it. But a year before, nobody liked it. Right. So it all depends. And I think the point that I'm getting at here is I had actually, when I first started writing poetry, I had a shitload. I'm talking about a shitload of poems typed, written. Yeah. I had at least over 800 poems. Ask me where those poems are right now.
You lost them?
No. I sent them off to Arizona, Clarkdale, Arizona, where my best friend lives. And I told her, keep these poems safe because nobody should ever read these poems. They were essentially these were essentially my poems, like practice. Like like you said, I'm good at my poetry, but I'm only good because I've spent so long trying to figure out every little style that I can do, and now I know. Now I'm so comfortable that I don't stress out as much as before. Before I was always trying to figure out, okay, well, do I do this? Do I do that? I was always reading different types of poems. I wasn't just trying to read Bukowski because everybody's trying to be an imitator to a Bukowski somewhere. So I was trying to mix in some Mark Twain with Bukowski, some Shakespearean with Bukowski. Right. I was trying to essentially make... Bukowski was the basis.
Yeah.
The other poets were just there filling in the petals. It was like a sunflower. And I had the middle part, the nice little brown, shitty part that nobody wants. I just need to fill it in with some yellow petals.
Yeah, y'all ever dipped into Hunter S. Thompson?
No.
If you ever get a chance, there's an article he wrote for Rolling Stone where he went to the Kentucky Derby, and it's not Fear and Loathing at the Kentucky Derby, but it's something like that. And it's hyperbolic. He's high off his fucking ass. I think he spent most of the time in his. No, I take that back. That was the Super Bowl they sent him to, and he spent most of the time in the hotel room, drunk and high off his ass. But for the Derby, he wrote this salacious fucking piece. There's orgies in the stands, and they're eating small children. And I'm being hyperbolic now. That's not quite the case, but it's that it is almost a free verse poetry. He's painting this picture for you, like I was saying about the you're using the thought to rhyme. You know what I mean? So he's hitting these beats as he's going along. Actually, his suicide letter is quite fucking well done. Actually, it has a title. It's called "Football Season Is Over." But yeah, if you dip into,
well, damn, that's depressing.
Yeah.
Well, once you get into like Thompson's stuff, man, that whole idea of gonzo journalism is basically it's not facts based. I'm not just here to tell you the numbers and what happened. I'm here to give you that visceral impression that I was getting and what the hell was going on in my head while I'm doing it. Matt Taibbi does a very similar style, but he's much more of a journalist than Thompson ever was.
Yeah.
But hell, Thompson's the guy that well, fuck it, man. I would suggest Thompson if Bukowski is kind of in your wheelhouse. But I've often read Bukowski's stuff and gone, whew, old man went a little farther than I'm not going that way.
Yeah, Bukowski's always been that person to step over the idea that everything should be, you know, Disneyfied.
Well, if you listen to some of his spoken word stuff, man, like the recordings that they
Oh no,
of
I have
him,
all of them.
dude, there's a couple times in there. It sounds like, I mean, at any moment, if one of these motherfuckers makes the wrong comment in the audience, he's just going to wade in with the mic stand.
There's actually I have all his readings in my phone, and there's a point where he yells at the crowd. It's like a good 30 seconds, and it's funny because they just titled it, "I'll fight any of you." In quotations,
I've heard that one.
I'll fight any of you. I'll take on all of you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who stands in front of me. If anybody gets out of line again, I will get off the stage and I'll kick your ass. And then he just starts competing with people with his drinking. And I think at one point he even says to the crowd, like, I'll drink any of you, and I'll keep drinking even after I'm dead.
Oh shit.
No, the guy I mean, the guy had a death wish. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
He Bukowski. A lot of people think that Bukowski, you know, was this guy, this grouchy old man that came out of nowhere. But Bukowski had a long time to perfect who he is. He was a drinker. He was a poet.
Just to be clear for the audience, refined maybe. Perfection might be a little strong.
Yeah, he refined it. He got to the point where he was comfortable, and he got lucky. That's the best way I can say it.
Have you ever heard that little story about the publisher that basically offered to send him?
The money.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that letter that he wrote back to him was, I mean, if anything, I think is a good example of, like, you cannot conflate the artist with the material. A lot of his stuff was this very dark fucking, what's the word I'm looking for? Very insular, you know, screaming out at the world. And then you read some of his correspondence with people, and
he's actually very different.
Yeah. I would not hesitate to use the word sweet even.
Yeah, he was. If you have ever read "Screams from the Balcony," one of his books, it has nothing to do with his poetry, has nothing to do with his short stories, but it's all his letters that he sent to publishers, people of his friends, family, and different person. You would almost think that like comedians like us, we have our persona up on stage and we have our persona in real life.
Right.
And
well, that's what I was going to get to earlier, man. I think more and more, and you see this with a lot of older artists, though when you see it in a younger artist, it's encouraging because it kind of like, oh shit, I can't wait to see what they do as they progress. But when that tone on stage and off stage starts to, I mean, granted, you're always going to have a little bit of more grandiose inflection when you're doing the performances, and the material itself is going to be hyperbolic in nature or, you know, inflammatory even, but if that tone can still resonate, you know, it's the difference between talking to an angry person when they're calm and when they're fucking angry. Yeah. It's the same person, but they're putting that emotional point at a higher level.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think just to interject a little on that, I mean, I'm gotta be honest, I don't know much about the dude, but off of what you're saying and what Sean was saying earlier, as well as it all goes back to the same thing. I think that everybody, every performer, every poet, every comedian, a lot of our material comes from emotion anyway. So going back to what you were saying about the persona, yeah, a lot of us have a persona, you know, that we have on stage, and then we're a person when we're off stage. As far as for him or whatever, I don't know if it was you or Sean that said, you know, that he may be even sweet.
Right.
That's because, again, I think, you know, through his material, through the stuff that he wrote, that was more of his emotion that built that persona.
And
but not that does not mean, I'm not saying that he wasn't very dark or very conflicted.
Yeah,
you know
no,
what I'm saying?
and see, like my final notes on Bukowski, because trust me, I can go on and on about this guy. I've studied his life, read his seen his movies, read his books, and even seen the letters that a lot of people don't want to read because it's not Bukowski. So but Bukowski, a quick biography of him is, imagine yourself, and this is the way I always try and do this. Put yourself in his life. He was 22 when he started writing short stories. Nobody accepted him. From 22 till he was 40, 50, he just gave up. But he didn't give up writing.
Right.
He just gave up sending it to people.
Yeah.
And he spent a good amount of his life in a post office. First he spent his good amount of time going from job to job to job to job, from girlfriend to girlfriend, all that fun stuff in his early 20s, 30s, and 40s. And then out of nowhere, he just says, you know what, I'm just gonna get a stable job. Like, I need this stable job. So he spent there for about, I want to say, 15 years doing the same thing. Being a carrier first. First and foremost, he was a carrier, so he was carrying the mail from, post office to people's houses, and then from there he was inside the actual post office, putting envelopes in little compartments and everything, and that's how he spent it. And then out of nowhere, Bukowski got accepted. One of his stories that he sent off, and if you ever watched the autobiography, the documentary of his life. Of course, this autobiography, this documentary came out when he was already old. I'm talking about 60, borderline 70 years old.
Yeah.
This old man is no longer the dark, edgy, sporadic, angry man that he was when he was in the early 30s. He was now tired. So you have him there with an acceptance letter. You have cameras in front of his face. He didn't have the courtesy of, podcasts. So people just put a camera to his face. And then in the first line that he says in this movie was, all of you, everybody, the fame, the women, the publishing, and even the cameras, they came way too late. All of you.
You're not going to get what you wanted.
Yeah, all of you came at a point in my life that I don't want to fucking deal with any of you. I'm tired. And it happens. I know somebody who, when I knew him when he was younger, he was always angry at everything. Like, he would get mad about everything. And he was quick to anger. And now that he's nearing, 50 years old, he's getting to the point where he doesn't even want to get angry anymore. Yeah. The things that would anger him before doesn't anger him.
He's just go.
He's just like, all right, cool. You can see it in his eyes. And that's the thing, is that his poetry, if you read it from the beginning, from when he first started to when he was already nearing his deathbed, near 1990, 91, 92, because he passed away in 1994. And the last book that he ever worked on and published was the thunder something, and it was the last book he ever wrote, and the last poem is essentially his death poem. That was the last poem he ever typed while in the hospital.
Oh.
But Bukowski had his persona. He just, it was more refined when he was younger. And I think that's the benefit sometimes now, is that it's good to realize this early on than to realize it when you're much, older and you can't express the way you want to express things.
Yeah. Just to be clear, when I made the statement earlier about talking about refinement as opposed to perfection, I'll not say the man didn't make progress in his life. He seemed to be a much more
I think we're always making progress. And I think we always...
I was going to bring up, what's her name? The American poet, and the name escapes me altogether. She basically went out in a shack in the woods and wrote...
Sylvia Plath? Yeah, so Sylvia Plath, she went out
for
an entire
month.
Up
killing herself?
She
No.
herself.
Okay, may have been Plath as well, but there was another one, again, name escapes me.
Sylvia Plath, I don't know if we're talking about the same person, but Sylvia Plath was married to... I don't want to say Mark Twain. I know the name because he's the one who found her poems and published it for her.
Okay.
But Sylvia Plath, this is why that joke I was saying earlier never existed, because you don't put a musician, a comedian, and a poet in the same room, because she was actually married to a poet. And the man...
And she was what?
She was a poet.
But you said she was married to a poet.
She essentially was overshadowed by him.
Oh, okay.
So he was more successful in his poetry than she ever was.
Okay, it wasn't Plath I was referring to then,
No.
and but the one I was referring to, and I'm sure somebody out there, if you're out there in the world and you know the name of the poet I'm talking about, by all means, write us a comment. But she basically went into the woods, and as opposed to say what Bukowski seemed to be doing later in life, and I know we keep coming back to Bukowski, but he's a great example because people are at least aware of the persona of the man.
Yeah.
He was kind of, like you said, a lot more scattered in his initial writings because he was just kind of putting these emotions out there and almost, in a way, building himself up to that plateau where he could achieve the emotional depth he wanted. Whereas I think a lot of, and for some reason this happens with poets and painters a lot, and I'm not sure what it is about that. Maybe the insular nature of the art form, because you're not, I mean, with poetry, a lot of people who write poetry never fucking perform it. You know what I mean? And I think there is a tendency, and historically we have people who have done this, they get so far into their work that rather than using it as some sort of outlet or refinement tool for what it is they're going through, they almost use it as a way to dig deeper into whatever that emotion is. And
like psychoanalysis, self-psychoanalysis.
Well, that's the thing, is you don't do there's never the analysis part. It's
essentially using the muse as your therapist. The muse is taking that out of you.
Well, that's what I'm saying though. Yeah. If you mistake the muse for the spark inside, you know what I mean? And that's being a little too poetic right there. But that visceral feeling, if you're mistaking the urge to convey that feeling with the feeling itself, then it's a feedback loop. So you're going like, I write angry stuff, I must be angry, so I write angrier stuff. Yeah. So and it can be very self-destructive.
Which is why most of my early work is in Arizona right now, because it was usually just an echoed feedback. I read it and I can't relate to it.
Have you heard about this the special that's out on Netflix right now? It's an Australian, Tasmanian comic named Hannah Gadsby.
No, but I'll look it up. I've been trying to look for more shows. The
special's called Nanette, and I remember listening to an interview with her probably back in 2012, 2014 on Tom Rhodes' podcast, I think. And she was talking about this idea that she had been, she's got a bunch of identifiers, but lesbian primary, and in Tasmania, lesbianism was, homosexuality, period, was fucking like outlawed. Like, you know, Jasper, Texas will drag you behind a truck type of outlawed. So there was not she's got that, you know, on her. And she spent, 20 years writing all these jokes about, I'm a lesbian, here's the troubles I face, fucking feminism and all this other stuff. And at some point she came to the conclusion that what she was doing was not addressing, rather than addressing whatever it is that's causing that emotional reaction to occur, she's just putting it out there. She's writing a joke about it. Kind of the way a lot of people do get into comedy, where it's like, I had problems in my life, and if I don't make jokes about them, they're going to kill me. Well, at some point you have to work on the problem. If you're just putting the material out there, it does nothing for you.
Yeah.
For you, it may do a lot. She's a hilarious comic. If you go back and watch some of her earlier stuff, and even the stuff that's in the special now, the problem is she's come to this conclusion, and then it's not really a problem. I think there are a lot of people who could enjoy it, but at a certain point in the comedy special, she stops and starts telling you the real story of all of these events, and there ain't no funny in it. Yeah. She's telling you the hardcore, the brutal events that did occur that have inspired these things to inspired her to make these jokes.
And she has this in her set.
Yeah, and
like the clean, straightforward stories.
Yeah, and it's and she keeps, this is me quitting comedy. I'm not doing comedy anymore. This is not comedy. And it's like, you get all these people going, this is the new wave of comedy, and it's like, no. This is how do you put it, an outgrowth of what comedy is. I mean, I'm not saying it's not something that should be looked at and go, wow, that's impressive, but to kind of go like, is this should all comedians be up on stage breaking it down? It's like,
breaking down their stories and saying, well, the whole route to the last joke is this story. Or
yeah, well, I've always been of the mindset, man, that comedy is, well, not always, man. I think actually listening to this interview with her was probably one of the things that set me off on this path. Was comedy is not therapy, because you're not just up there saying what's on your mind. These are not just thoughts that are coming out. This is something that you have sat down and considered for at least a little bit of time. And like you were saying about the poem, I don't know if it's a one-to-one comparison, but the poem about the parking ticket where you did it a year later and all of a sudden you're getting the response that you were expecting to get the first time. I think there are at least a few, if you're using your own life as the inspiration for your artwork, to be able to convey the emotion that you want to convey with the artwork without also confusing that with the emotion that you are currently experiencing is difficult.
Yeah.
And you do have to separate that, because you can allow a feedback in there where now you're off tone when you're presenting the material.
Well, I do want to interject a little bit on that. I believe that is true to a certain extent, but you do have to convey the emotion and know how to also separate it from the real emotion. Because if for example, I have this bit where it's whatever happened, like it's horrible, somebody died, and I make it into a joke.
Right.
But if I don't separate the real emotion from that,
Right,
then 90% of the time, it's not going to be funny. So what I'm saying is, I'm pretty sure that if that happened, at that time I was sad. So if I'm going to perform it, I understand that I have to separate that original emotion in order for me to comedically make it funny. What I was going to say was that, at least for me, and I'll speak for myself, I think the very times that I have been successful on stage in delivering my material is when I was the most honest. Like when people get me on stage and when you hear my material, 99% of my material either happened or I saw it. Like that's, and I've told a couple of people before. Some of the jokes were very slightly altered for your entertainment.
right.
Like for example, on some, it's just the punchline might have been altered a little bit, like the getting pulled over joke. The cop didn't really try. I wasn't trying to suck his dick. You know what I'm saying? That was the funny part. You know what I mean?
He may have asked you to blow, but
Yeah,
that
yeah.
wasn't the tone of voice he used. Yes.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. But everything before that punchline, and poetry is something completely different for me, and I'm gonna relate that in a second too. But as far as the comedy, my point is, because this is also the advice that I give to other comics.
Right.
Like, if you want to be successful and funny, be yourself. You have to be yourself. You have to give people the best of you.
Well, this goes to what I was saying, though,
and
man.
be creative about it.
If you're currently in a state of either emotional distress or even a manic type of state, man, like I've seen comics go up on stage and they're bouncing around, they're moving around, they're throwing material out, but it's almost like they're moving one step ahead of the audience.
Yeah.
And not in the sense that you want, where it's like you're in control of the set. But
if you're all over the place, yeah, that
you're too quick
do.
for them. But with the emotional thing, man, I think the honesty comes in more in trying to convey the honesty of the scenario you're setting up. Because if you're bringing in, and I'm going to caveat this, I've got a qualification for this, but if you're bringing whatever your current emotional state is into the piece, then that is going to have a resonance with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because think of it more of a sense where, for example, now, me, today, I'm very content.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm happy.
Do you not see this calm motherfucker?
Yeah.
When I met him, you were very.
I to put it frankly, yeah, I was going through a lot of tough times I think when we first met, I was going through a breakup.
Yeah, you told me.
I was getting into fights with my ex-girlfriend a lot. A lot of nights was just spent fighting and outside, inside, tapping on the window, everything. It was just I was almost manic when you had first met me, and I used a lot of my poetry and a lot of my outside persona, outside of my poetry to cover that shit up. But it would always come out of my poetry again.
Yeah.
And then this is where we come in, where I say, I've noticed that if I ever go back and read one of those old poems to a crowd, like let's say if I go back and read a poem that I had originally typed for my ex-girlfriend, I no longer relate to that emotion, like I'm no longer angry, or I'm no longer mad, or I'm not no longer this or that. However, the person that I am when I go up on that stage has to be that emotion. So I've almost picked up in the sense where like I can be happy today,
Right.
but if tonight when I go up on that stage, and let's say if I just pick up my phone and read one of the poems, and it's one of the poems that I had originally typed when I was upset, I have to now be upset for that time frame, for that one poem,
Right.
to convey it perfectly. Or I shouldn't say perfectly. I should say with the emotion that I had originally typed. So for that moment, I put that's why I don't know if you've ever seen me, and I think you've seen me where I do this, where I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to have my headphones in for just a couple seconds.
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
I always put my headphones. And it's never so I can ignore everybody. No. It's so I can put depressing music, or I can put happy music, or I can put some sort of music to bring myself into the mentality of whatever the poem I'm about to read.
Yeah.
I always have the 3 poems that I'm about to read set up. And I always go over them in my head. When I'm reading them, I'm always reading them. And I always have the song playing. And I get myself in that mentality. Okay, this is the mentality. This is the voice. This is the voice. And I try and make sure never to break character. I always try and make sure, like, let's say, I remember one time I was going to go up there and read some sad poetry, and you and I were just cracking jokes outside of before that, and I didn't put my headphones in, and I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'll just go up on stage. And I read the poetry, and it almost sounded optimistic.
Yeah.
When the poem was actually supposed to be the opposite of that. So I was like, well, shit, now I sound like I'm telling a joke, and I'm not trying to tell a joke, or I'm not trying to do this. So then that's why sometimes when I'm up on stage, I was like, you know what? Let's cut the serious shit. I'm going to read a funny poem now, because I'm in that mood now. Like, I might as well go back to funny poetry.
Yeah.
And that's why I always have backups. I always like keep myself like, okay, if I find myself losing that emotion halfway into a set, I'll finish the poem and then go, you know what? I'm gonna change it up. I was originally gonna read this poem, but now I'm gonna read this poem because I'm not in that mentality to read the other poem anymore. Right. But yeah, poetry, comedy, music. I don't think anybody has ever successfully used it to find or put down their problems per se exactly 100%, because you always run into that little dilemma. Like Sean said, you run into the dilemma where you hit a wall, and that wall is telling you, hey, you're dwelling too deep into this shit. You have to make it funny at some point, because you're a comedian. Make it funny. Yeah. Because nobody wants to hear your shitty sob story anymore. Right. You have to make it funny. Or in a point of view of a poet, hey, you're going great. Hey, you're talking about your breakup. Great, whatever. Where's the fucking point? You know,
you're absolutely right. But that's what I was gonna say. That's where 2 things come into play. The most important things in a poem, in a bit that you write. 2 most important things. That is, the fuck, I forgot one. But the other one was the punchline. That's where the creativity. Mm-hmm. That's where you, as a performer, as an artist, as a comedian, whatever, that's where your creativity and your punchline comes in. Because this is what I'm saying. You can say the angriest story or the saddest story, you know what I'm saying, for like 3 minutes, if that's how long your bit is. You can say the angriest, the saddest story, but if you have the creativity to, at the very end, flip it all around upside down with that punchline, and it strikes that laugh or it strikes that reaction in your poem, that's all you need. Like that's all I want to say. What you're saying is right, but I just feel that as a performer, that's where you're now. Like Sean said, if you wrote that and you're not creative about your turning point or your point, like you said, or the punchline, then yeah, you just wasted 3 minutes of everybody's life. And then the sad part is that you probably built up the audience so much, and if your punchline is not strong, then they're fucking depressed. Cause
Now, and another thing that I was just thinking about, and that's where a lot of people always say, it's always good to, which is why I mentioned Bukowski's early work, ranting,
right?
But Bukowski's later work clarified.
yeah,
There was a difference between the two, and I'll tell you why. He used to always. Now imagine back then in the age of no technology, you had only a typewriter or a pencil. Now, if I asked you to type me 2 pages by hand, longhand, you'll probably write it as quickly as possible with the emotion you feel, right? Let's say if you're angry and you want to write that story in 2 pages, you write it, but then you don't want to proofread it, or you don't want to go back and, redo it because you just spent, you're tired. It's the same thing. Like, it's easier now today to proofread than it was back then. So that's why a lot of the early work of Bukowski was always he didn't want to proofread it. He didn't want to go back and say, well, I just wasted all this time writing a poem that I was angry in. I'm not going to go back and see if I put a point to it or not. I'm just going to send it up, which is why a lot of his early stuff never got published. Yeah. Or it did get published, but some of it was just, put to the side because they were like, what's the point? Like, I don't see the point to these poems.
Yeah.
And that's why I think when I had originally first started, I noticed that I would type and I would just post it on Facebook, or I would post it on something, and I never proofread it until I started carrying around a piece of paper with pens.
Yeah, he told me that.
So now I write everything first, and then I go back and I read it and I go, okay, I was clearly upset in this poem, but now I'm not upset about it anymore. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to break it apart, and I'm going to put it back together. Like I'm sewing together a little blanket.
Well, this goes to what I was saying about the therapy. I think the act of putting it down on paper, or what's the word I'm looking for here?
The act of creating something with the emotion you feel.
Oh, well, not even just creativity, man, but I know with comedy a lot, man, especially with stories that come from real life, man, you put the story down in as clear a detail as possible. Oh, yep. I got a great example of this, or not example, but a good lesson for it would be Christopher Titus. He's on several times. He's kind of spoken about this.
Is that the guy from Winnie the Pooh?
No. Christopher Titus is. Shit. I'm trying to remember what you would have seen him in. He did the show Titus as tall, spiky-haired blonde dude. Real fucking. He talks about his mom killing herself and his dad.
Oh, that's definitely not.
Yeah, dude.
That's definitely not Christopher Robinson.
Do yourself.
That's it.
Yeah,
the one from
from Winnie the Pooh.
Yes, Christopher Robinson.
Yeah, not Robinson, but I think it's Christopher Robbins.
You're right, Christopher Robin. But do yourself a favor, man. Watch Norman Rockwell is Bleeding. But he talks about his writing process, and what he basically does is write the entire story with as many details as possible. He's not putting punchlines in. He's not worried about where the joke's going to go. He's writing this story out in as much detail as possible and getting it out, and then going back and going, okay, this chunk's is set up. Here's the punchline. And then you just put in as many punchlines as possible, and then you go back and you filter them down to the finest stuff. But what I was getting at was that act of putting it out there, of actually not necessarily verbalizing, but describing in detail the events that you have witnessed or experienced, that can be therapeutic. But that artistic turn has to come with, and not to say that a lot of people, when they're just straight expressing their emotions or expressing an idea, cannot be very artistic and, hell, entertaining in it sometimes. But to maintain that in any sense of artistic form, there has to be that removal. You have to step back from it.
and it's more. I remember my college professor told me, you have to see. It was my creative writing class, and he said, he goes, Victor, you're a very passionate person, but passion is like picking up a rock and throwing at somebody's face. All right, like it'll hurt.
Yeah.
If it's not properly, refined.
Yeah.
But now here's the thing. If you know you're gonna throw something out there that hurts, or that it's meant to bring somebody to an awareness, like a joke that's, maybe not in a lighter tone, but you still want to make it a lighter tone, like, something, anything, right? He says, think of that rock again, and it's still gonna hurt when the person gets hit by it, right? It's still gonna hurt. It's like somebody throws you a rock, it's gonna hurt you. But if you refine it, if you polish it, if you turn it around, you turn it into a nice little diamond.
Yeah.
And you still throw it at the person, it's still gonna hurt them. But when they look at it, they're gonna go, well, at least he had the courtessy of throwing me something worth a shit. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's an actual fucking diamond.
That's
okay, cool.
That's a good example.
And so whenever I type these poems, whenever I do any of my work, I always keep in mind, am I throwing a rock or am I throwing a diamond at these people? And most of the time, I think I'm going a 50-50 route.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I've ever written the most perfect poem. I think somebody has told me before that poem was perfect, don't ever change it. But improvisation is a hell of a fucking thing, because you get up there and it may seem like I'm reading it right off the fucking phone, but I'm not. I'm improvising most of the poem as well.
You ever heard you familiar with David Allan Coe?
Yeah.
The song "You Never Call Me by My Name."
Yeah.
That one line. Now, I thought that I had written the perfect country and western song, but my friend told me, "Oh no, was it?" The guy sent him the letter, and he's like, "My friend thought he had written the perfect country and western song, but I told him he had not written the perfect country and western song because he didn't talk about mama, trains, or dogs." So he wrote another verse.
Yeah, it's the same premise. I mean, I'm always up there, and I'm always changing the poem in some shape or form. I'm adding a so when there wasn't a so. I'm adding an and when there wasn't an and. I'm omitting a name, or I'm omitting this word. I'm doing so many changes up on stage, and then by the time I get off, I'm like, half the poem that I had originally written,
it's not the same
poem I just read up on stage.
Yeah.
But so yeah, and that's polished work.
Well, I think about it this way, man. A set list is not a track list, and I think a lot of people make that mistake, in that the set list is not there to go like, oh, I'm going to give them this, this, and this. It's to set those little boundaries for you. So you go like, okay, I know what the next point's going to be, but I have the room to play around here. I can improvise. I can change it up a little bit. We can have, say, even a dialogue in this solo performance, but that line has to be there. You have to have some structure to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And see, it's funny that you, I mean, and that works great with poetry and stuff. But like when you go to comedy, and I'm not saying this is wrong or right. I mean, if it works for you and it's great, then awesome.
Right.
There's really no wrong or right way to write comedy. But what I'm saying is, see, me, when I started writing my comedy sets, I was pushed to be tight. And I mean tight, not as in like my material's great, but I mean tight as in timing tight. Because, man, like people down here are very lenient. Like they let you go up on stage for 10, 12 minutes, if you're good, whatever. And if you're laughing, they let you go.
Or if they're not, they're those nice people that are like, I really should shine a light on him and let him know that he needs to get off the stage. But
Yeah, but
it's
nah.
okay. I'll just wait. It's
Exactly.
Well, it's also you show up to some open mics and there's like 5 people in the crowd and 3 people on the mic, and it's
Yeah,
exactly. Well, the thing is that in LA, dude,
Yeah,
they don't play with that
yeah,
shit.
you have a time frame.
They 5 minutes and you gotta be off at 4:58. You know what I'm saying? Like that. Like that's how tight it is. Point being, is that taught me comics. We think in seconds because every second counts. So if you actually, and I actually don't mind showing you, ever since then, and ever since I started writing comedy,
For the people that can't see, he is now going through his phone.
exactly. And I'm sorry, y'all can't see. We haven't.
Don't worry, I'll explain it as if
We still
we
haven't.
are on the air
set
going
up,
word for word.
set up the actual camera angle and the video.
Oh no! I don't think
so-
anybody ever wants to see. One of these days, if I come back to this podcast, you best believe I'm gonna walk in here with my pants off, and I'm just gonna be like, "Hey guys, what's up? What's cracking like?"
I'm not sure.
that'll be our
that-
premium content.
That would be a premium
yeah,
cost.
Definitely. See, look, if you actually look at this shit, I'm trying to. Oh, right here. Wait, is it? No, that's not a good example.
Just to be clear, while I do agree with you, Freddie, I also am a practicing heretic when it comes to timing, man.
What do you mean exactly by that?
I'm sure I've pissed off more than a few hosts by
Yeah, staying
taking
up there
that.
longer than you're supposed to, and it's not only the host.
To be fair, it's usually not an ego thing. It's not like I want more
Yeah.
of this. It's like, no, I haven't finished this joke. When I finish this
and-
joke,
no,
I will
and-
get
yeah,
off the stage.
No, and I get that completely because it's the same. I remember one time with this one host, I had originally told him like I normally do 3 poems, and he's like, "Well, it's because right now we're in a time constraint. Can you read one long one and one really short one?" And I was like, "All right, cool."
Right.
So I'll do that real quick. And for everybody, he's about to jump in. What's up?
Yeah, look, see, that you see where it says 2 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes. So in other words, you take 2 minutes to read this whole thing. You have to, and then 2 minutes, and
See, because there's a point to me writing this as well. I learned in LA. I thought at the beginning that there was just a long line and they had a time to hit and everything, and they were just being dicks about it. To be honest,
Right.
But I learned that because of this, I learned to be very tight with my time. So that's why to this day, everywhere I go perform, I ask them how much time do I got, because when they give me the time, I know what's set to perform because I got my minutes counted. Anyway, because when you
Just to throw a caveat there, I have
Yeah.
seen you run the light.
I'm sorry.
I have seen you run the light, sir.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I've done that too, but I know when and where. Like Victor was saying,
Right.
I know when and where I can pull that off. Which brings me to my next point. When you actually go, I don't know if either one of y'all have ever been to an actual audition. Like whether I've been to an audition for a commercial, I've been to an audition for an actual part in a TV series and whatnot.
Right.
When they tell you you got 10 minutes, you got 8 minutes, you got 5 minutes, like that's exactly what you got. And people have gone up there and been great, but because they went over, they won't even look at their performance again. So that, and this was somebody, when I was performing in LA, this was somebody that told me, they were like, dude, like you got to be tight with your time. And this is exactly what he said. He said, because if you ever want to go to Burbank, I think he said Burbank, and audition for the Tonight Show or whatever, or if you want to audition for Comedy Central in New York or whatever, they're very tight because they have a lot of other fucking people they got to deal with and whatnot. So if they give you 5 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever it is, that's what you got to come up with. If you go over, they're not even gonna look at you. So ever since then, that timing
Right.
has like stuck with me. Like Sean said earlier, down here I've slacked off.
It's lax, man.
Because I slacked off because
Show starts at 9:30, and by that we mean 10:45.
Yeah. Exactly,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, and see, I know a lot, like Freddie's mentioning. when you have that tight schedule, when you're given those 5 minutes, for a comedian, I feel like that would be stressful. It must be
Fuck
stressful.
yeah, it is.
Right.
But especially if you're not used to it, or if you are used to it.
Yeah, when you're not used to it.
or if you already know, okay, 5 minutes, like I'll work around it, you know.
Yeah.
But for a poet, hell, for a musician, even musicians, they have to follow their time. So like, if they have 5 minutes, they're like, well, shit, I can't do certain songs because they
Right.
go over that time frame. But for a poet, it's happened to me before where like I go up there and I go, you know what? I don't want to read old work. I want to read the new stuff that I have. But the new stuff
Yeah.
is a little bit long. Like some of the poems might be a little bit too long. And so I go up there and I know I've had my friend, like my best friend, tell me, she goes, that poem was great had you not rushed it, because you rushed the emotion.
I was
Yeah.
actually going to get to
Yeah.
this. It's an anecdote I heard, and I may be mistaken in this, but I want to attribute this to Nick Guerra, who's actually a comic from down here in the valley. He's done the Tonight Show, so go check him out. But he was talking on something, and again, I'm not sure if this was Nick Guerra or not, but I want to say it was. Regardless, the comic is talking about going in for a interview or an audition for something, and he said, you know, you got 5 minutes. You go up there and that's your time. So he's fucking working on it. He's getting the timing down. He's recording his sets. He's taking the times. He's cutting words. He's, you know, doing all the work you got to do. And then he goes up, I think the night before the audition, and he's like, this is my set. I have it honed. This is my weapon. He goes up there and ends up running it like 30 seconds shorter than it should be, because he just went up there with that boom, boom, boom. And yeah, man. And that's also... Now, who's to say whether or not it was a good set? I don't remember that bit of the story, but that is also a problem when you're talking about something. Again, with music, you have that tempo.
And I mean, even with poetry, I know whenever I read a poem to a coworker at work, and I read it at my pace, it always comes out great. But well, at least in my opinion, I always feel like I put more emotion to it. I read it at my slow pace. I don't rush the words.
Yeah.
And I know that you're waving at him because it's already 8:45. But before you close it off, there is.
We don't have to. I'm just doing it because of you.
Oh, okay.
We don't have a time frame.
No.
We're doing this because of you.
Well,
Put it all on the guest, Freddy.
Yeah, it's all on the guest. No, I do have to go, but I want to end something.
See, so it wasn't my fault.
Yeah, for the people that are listening, I know a lot of people, whenever they go to open mics, they sit there and they look at these performers, these comedians, these musicians, these poets, these anything, and they start thinking, man, I wish I could do the shit that they do. And I know a lot of people that don't want to go up there because they're afraid of the crowd, or they're afraid that their work is not going to be good enough to be up there in the crowd. And it is pretty intimidating. But I want to say, and I've always said this whenever I go up to open mics, and I'll say it now to a podcast, and I'll say it whenever I publish a book. The first line that I will always put is say, don't try, just write. Just and
that is great advice.
And for me, it's just right. But for comedians, just make jokes. For musicians, just write music.
Well, that's why I tell everybody when they come and they're like, "Oh man, I'd love to go up there, or I thought about going up there, but I didn't." It's like, do you have a joke?
Yeah,
all you need is one.
Yeah, and even then, just even if you just want to get the feel of it, like most of the time when you get up there, you're not. See, and this is the thing. When we had originally started this, we were talking about how it must be difficult to be a big comedian, because poets, we go up there and we have the persona. Or at least we already worked on the persona so well that we know that, okay, time to switch up the switch. Like I'm switching off the light, I'm going dark mode, or I'm going happy mode, or this poem requires this person, or whatever. You know, I have that. But comedians, and I've noticed that Sean is one of the most consistent comedians I've met, where like he'll be the same person off and on stage. His voice never changes. Yeah. And the reason why I say that is because if let's say, you asked me, Victor, I want you, instead of going up there to do poetry, do comedy. So now in my mind frame, I'm going, oh, I have to tell a joke. So now comedians, they do the same thing. They think I have to tell a joke. So then their personality becomes, instead of what they're normed to, like let's say if you're a very like serious person,
Yeah.
now you're up on that stage and you have to be serious,
Yeah.
or you have to be
Funny.
funny and serious,
Yeah.
but you have to be funny. That's why I've whenever I talk to these hoes and I tell them, hey, I don't want you to tell them that
You
I'm a
talk to these
hoes.
hoes.
Yeah, I caught myself. But I was not gonna go back because I was like, I doubt anybody else caught that. Motherfucker, you caught it. All right, cool.
I've been tempted to refer to a few hosts in that
Yeah,
way.
as hosts. No, but I've told them like, hey, don't. I'm gonna put here that I'm doing poetry, but don't tell them that I'm a poet. Don't tell them that I've been here this many times. Don't. I want to go up there fresh. I want people to think that I'm just some guy coming into a bar and that's it. Like, I don't want people to know that I've been doing this for so long, because then they're going to think, and this is the point that I'm trying to get to. If I tell you, hey, I've been doing open mics for 5 years, first impression, you're going to think, this guy must be good.
Right.
But if I go up there and I tell you, oh, I'm just here doing the open mic, don't worry
So
about it.
you don't like setting the bar.
I don't like setting the bar. I don't like a host or anybody thinking that I'm a poet, because then they immediately think he must be good with something. He must be good with his poetry. He must be good with this. He must be good with his jokes. He must be good with his music. He must have been doing this for a long time. If I tell you that, hey, I've been writing poetry since 2008, you'll think, wow, this guy must have perfected his art by now. But then you read my shit and you're like, dude, this is 8 years of your work, really? But the whole point that I'm trying to make is, don't try. Just do whatever you got to do.
That goes back to what I said of the advice that I want to give, that I give to everybody else that goes up there for the first time. And it's, I think, because it was the best advice given to me. They just said, don't be afraid to be yourself.
And also, if you don't ever go up to that stage, okay, but
Yeah.
do the thing. Don't sit there and envy, wondering, well, that could be me, or like that old saying, like, oh, well, I could have painted that.
Yeah.
Had I painted that.
Right.
No, just don't envy the other person for doing it. Just do it. Even if you have to copy the painting, you are at least know that you did it, okay, and then move on to the next thing. But actually do the act of whatever you know that you want. And if it doesn't come out of you like naturally, if you have to force yourself to be, for example, me, I paint. I've been picking up painting, right?
Yeah.
And that's not to say I'm a good painter, but I've been picking up painting, and I've thought of painting, here and there. And I'm even going to college for painting right now. And does it come out of me naturally? No. I will sit there in front of a canvas and not even know what I want to paint. I know some people that will sit in front of a canvas and paint to their heart's content. They know what they want to put on the canvas. Jokes. So there are people that I know that can tell a joke on the spot. Me, I can tell a joke naturally if I know I don't have to tell the joke. If I'm told that I have to tell a joke, I won't say the joke right. But if I have to, like, if I'm naturally just having a conversation with somebody, it just comes naturally out of me.
Yeah.
Now
That pressure's a motherfucker.
yeah, it's a bitch and a half.
Yeah.
And so whenever, so my thing is poetry, same thing. If I realize that I'm pushing myself to write a poem, it's because I'm forcing it out of me.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's no longer a natural poem.
Yeah.
I'm forcing myself to that act. Painting, I'm not a painter, but if you have to force something out of you, if you have to consistently tell yourself, okay, time to sit down and write, and it's such a drag, just don't write.
Yeah.
If you have to sit there and say, man, I have to be funny today because I have to tell jokes, don't do jokes. But at the same time, if you know you want it, you want to do it, but you're just afraid of doing it, but it's there, it's itching at you like a fingernail on your bones,
Right.
then don't try, just do it.
Damn it, Victor. I never thought I would say this, but I have to fucking say it. I actually learned something from you today, man.
That I'm not the Ninja Turtle looking motherfucker that I...
Fucking da-da-da-da. The more you know.
That's a little insider joke. Freddy, when I think the third time that I met him, he was wearing a Ninja Turtle shirt, and the motherfucker was walking towards me, and I just thought, Jesus fucking Christ, this Ninja Turtle looking, and I think I was high on caffeine that day because I was shouting it like crazy in the Luna Coffee House, and it was crazy.
Yeah.
But no, see, when I'm at work, when I'm outside of my house, my girlfriend always says, "Hey, you're a different person." We were downtown the other day, different person. I feed off people's energy.
Yeah.
I'm a consumer of souls. I want to say I'm like the Galactus of people's personalities. I always want to feed off somebody else's energy. If I see that you're happy, I want to be there and just be like, oh, I want to be happy too.
Yeah,
like,
I want to be.
Make me happy.
Well, that's what they say, man. When you actually let that you surround yourself with that positive energy, that positivity, like, it spills over. But it's the same thing. If you surround yourself with a bunch of negative motherfuckers, it's like, that's never gonna work.
Yeah,
you're not funny. You can't write. It's like, and then you start feeling like that. Well, fuck, maybe I'm not funny. You know.
Well, there's a little note for the people listening at home there. Like you were saying, if you're trying to write and it's not coming, don't fucking force it. But if you think that you want to write and you are feeling some urge towards that, sit down in front of a blank piece of paper, because that'll teach you real quick whether or not you really wanted to write or whether you just kind of like the idea.
And for the people at home, this is what I was talking about, throwing the rock and throwing the diamond. You see how I was just spilling out words. I was trying to figure out what I was trying to say, but it was just coming out like pebbles, just and it was everywhere. Yeah. And then out of nowhere, Sean comes in and says, here's the refined version, better version. Boom. That's what I like. And that's the whole point to a good, not only to a good poem, but to good anything, is when you have somebody in the back wing, or when you sit back and you're no longer attached to the original idea, to the original premise, and now you are able to say, oh, I'm gonna piece it together in this way. And that's a good example. It just happened naturally right now in this podcast. Think of it.
Well, that's a great example of what I was trying to get at earlier.
Yeah.
Of the you almost can't be the same person who wrote the material.
Yeah, because I'm over here trying to convince people to, not try to something that they should do, but I'm emotional about it. Right? Yeah. I'm passionate about it. But my passion is sometimes, if I don't refine it, it just comes out of everywhere. So that's why I write it first and then I type it later. Right. Sean is that kind of equalizer, I want to say, between the thought process between you and I right now. Yeah. Where like you're saying something, I'm saying something, you're saying something, he's refining it as he's thinking. We'll say it like this, and then he goes, all right, guys, this is and that's a good example.
Why do you think? And this is not a joke. Why do you think me and Sean? Why do you think I chose or I approached Sean as my co-host for this shit? Because it only took about a day or two, man, to realize how we clicked and his creativity and mine. And now the way we've developed the personality for this podcast. I mean, we're still ourselves, but I'm saying for the podcast alone. It's like Sean's bad. It's Sean's bad, and I'm evil.
Yeah, it's like the Jekyll and Hyde effect.
Little Eminem reference for y'all out there.
Yeah, and here's the thing: you and I were the Jekyll and Hyde constantly. We're like, you are trying to say something, and you're immediately the evil version. But then after that fades away, and you come back to that good side, you sit there and you refine it, right? But then you have people who are naturally just, you need that other person where, like, if we're being the evil versions, you need somebody in the back wing going, hey, I'm the
angel.
Yeah, because if imagine a podcast between you and me.
At best, a beer.
Yeah, we would need subtitles and like a translator in the back. This comes with a translation afterwards. We'll try our hardest to piece together. Well, it'll be like a commentary on a commentary. Like we're having a podcast, and then in the back is like us talking over our own podcast. Like, I think this is what I was trying to say, but I'm not really 100% sure. Like, I think we kind of went off on this rant. You know what, guys? This is whatever. And I think that's it. It's like a commentary in a movie. they're sitting there and they're trying to explain, hey, this is why we chose this scene, or this is why this scene, or this and these scenes. He's the commentator. We're the person's just drawing our passions back and forth, like people this, people that, whatever. But at the premise, that's what proofreading or refining our art style has become. He's not doing it right now because earlier when he was trying to put his passions forward, we were the ones dissecting it and putting it
right.
stable, But that's essentially what I'm trying to tell everybody is, if you have a passion, if you have something you want to say it, write it down, type it up. Don't think about grammar. Don't think about periods. Don't think about anything. Just put the words as quickly as possible on the page, and do not stop until you finally said, you know what? Okay, that's enough. And then back afterwards, leave it for a couple days. Hell, come back to it in a couple months if you have to. And then read it over, and you'll see that you'll come into it with a clearer mind, and you'll be able to go, I can work with this. I can work with that. I can work with this, that. And some people are good at doing that hours afterwards.
Yeah.
I can't do that. If I'm angry 1 minute, it will take me an entire day to process that emotion before I'm happy again. A good way of explaining this would be, and my ex-girlfriends used to hate this. My current girlfriend loves this. But if I'm upset, I'll get over it once I go to sleep. When I wake up, I'll forget why I was upset. So that's why whenever
That's awesome. Man.
Yeah, it's great.
Reset button's great.
Yeah, but my ex-girlfriends hated that because I will go to sleep angry, wake up, and they'll still be angry. And I'll be happy as a motherfucker. Just, why were we arguing again? I don't remember. And that's why I always try and get all my work done before I go to sleep. So when I wake up, I can go through it again afterwards, later. That's why most of my work, I always publish it in the morning. Because that's when I go through all the stuff that I wrote, typed in the night, left for myself there, and then came back to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we put a sizable little chunk down on tape right now that I think the audience should have some fun chewing over. If this is,
I think that was a good fucking hour of me just talking, man. I love this See, and I love podcasts because of this. They're very it's like being at home.
It is a conversation. I mean, you're thinking about what you're saying, but at the end of the day, you're communicating with the people in front of you.
You're
and what you just said, man, just those simple words about you loving to do this, and loving to come here and come on our podcast and do podcasts in general. That's what we really appreciate. Before me and Sean started this, that is one of the things we kept in mind. We wanted to make sure that our guests and our listeners, that we made them comfortable, that we made them feel at home. And that's why we chose the long form conversation type where there's no rules, there's no nothing.
Or if we do make them uncomfortable, it's not so short that they're blue balled by the end of it. It's like, wait, there's no resolution, damn it.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, we do need to go ahead and wrap up if we're going to get Victor out of here on time. What do you got coming up, man?
Well, currently I am working on, I have been working on 2 epic poems. Essentially, I've been trying to get this book out of my head, but it's essentially a book of my life. But if you've ever read my poetry in the chronological order that it is, it's essentially a story.
Right.
Yeah.
But now what I'm trying to do is go back into it, read all the old material, take old poems that I've already posted, and see if I can maybe turn them inside out again and see if I can make an entire poem out of everything put together to this exact date.
Right on.
And it's coming out pretty interesting at this point. It's going to include a lot of my shit, my upbringings, the relationship I dealt with my father and my mom. And there you can actually see why I treat them very differently. I call my father, and I call my mom, because I cared more towards my mother than I did my own father, because I don't know, I just related more to her and I had to protect her from certain things. And I remember, so yeah, I have those 2 epic poems that I'm currently working on. And what else?
You have any live readings coming up?
Live readings, I have every Monday, Yelbria, which trying
You
to
go every Monday?
Oh, fuck yeah. I haven't missed one. I think the only time I ever missed an open mic at Yelberia was when I was sobering up. I spent maybe a month without going. But that was only a month because I missed the one that was coming up, and then I missed the one that they had originally skipped. So they gave me like a 2-week pass. They gave me a chance to get my thoughts together because I was a shit wreck.
Let's be honest, that could be a whole nother podcast between the three of us, is the relationship to alcohol.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
definitely.
If you guys ever have me back, and I really hope you guys do.
And we will.
Yeah,
believe me.
currently right now I'm a year and 4-5 months sober.
Awesome, dude. I'm very proud of you.
And that's because I've been putting myself more out there with my girlfriend, because my girlfriend, she doesn't like going downtown, but I've been like, she wants to go downtown every once in a while, like Tuesdays for the Taco Tuesday and Saturdays with her friends. So I'm like, you know what? And she'll ask me like, do you want to come? I don't want to put you in an envelope, an environment that you're not going to be comfortable in. I'm like, no, I want to. So that gets me more adaptable to the situation. And I've been able to actually watch her and everybody drinking like their drinks, and me just being okay.
And
with
it feels awesome, huh?
it feels great.
Yeah,
I feel like Edward Cullen from Twilight, from the vampire books, from that one.
I'm pretty sure they know what they are.
Breaking Dawn and shit.
Yeah.
Like, I could smell the alcohol. I could smell the blood. To me, like, the metaphor here is blood. Like, it's in my, I feel it, and I just want to taste it again. But I've learned to just ignore it. Yeah. And I found substitutes for it. For example, coffee. I drink it black because it gives me the same bitterness as whiskey did. And I just found subtle little replacements like that. And it's kept me, in that mind frame. I also try and avoid emotional discharges where people just piss me off or something, because it always brings me back to like, well, I could just drink and forget about the situation.
Well, man, I think we've had this conversation before on the side, me and you, but I'm also a recovering alcoholic, and I've been clean and sober for 7.5 years now. So if you ever need anything, man, reach out, man.
And fun story, the house that's right over here, the abandoned one, okay. The reason why I was freaking out about this address, because I was like, did he send me the right 123? And I was like, all right, well, I'll give it a try. And that's why when I sent you the text saying I was outside, nobody came out, and I was kind of like freaking out because maybe I'm at the wrong address. But that house was where I went to go get my what do you call it before you get married?
Oh,
before you get married.
I'm sorry, guys. It's because he was rubbing his nose, and that was like a cocaine on.
No, essentially, before you get married, you have to go have a conversation, like conferences weekly with this married couple that have been married for more than 10 years, and that was the house that they lived in. And I passed by, and they're not there anymore, and I was like, shit, man, ain't that about a bitch? But and
you didn't get married?
Oh no, I got married. I got married and divorced.
Oh yeah, my bad. Yeah.
And stated that up front.
Yeah, I stated that up front. And what was I gonna say? But no, I do the open mics every Monday, Yelberia. So guys, people listening, Yelberia is still there. Yelberia Cultura, because I realized that if you just say Yelberia,
they go to the
they go
herbal
to
place.
That's right down the block.
Yeah, that's right down the block. Oh, great! And then they get there and they're like, some guy named Victor sent us here open mic, and he's like, taco? No, thank you. But yeah, Yelberia Cultura 10. It always starts. They say 10. But the motherfuckers like wait till the crowd's real nice and like plump. It's like that fucking Harry Potter movie, the last one, where Dumbledore is like saying, when Harry Potter reaches a certain point, he must be the one to kill, what's his fucking name, Voldemort. And Snape's like, so you've been raising him like cattle for murder. And that's essentially what the hosts do, is they sit there and they're just like, we're waiting. Don't worry, guys, we're getting there. And you as a performer, you're like, dude, okay, we're already ready. We got that energy pumped up. Like, we came here, and then it just kind of dies down. Like, your energy goes down at some point.
Yeah.
And anyways, but that's why we're trying to get the scene back up, because it used to be this great thing, and then they stopped doing it for a good semester. and people kind of forgot about the open mic.
Yeah.
I think they moved to a thing during the winter where they were doing it once a month.
And it fucking sucked
Yeah, it did.
for a lot of performers, and they kind of now picked it up where they're doing it now every week, but
I think he said, the owner said that they were going to stop again as soon as summer was over, wasn't it?
as soon as summer was over, and
They go back to once a month again.
once a month because of the semester. Supposedly it's for college, but I think people will go anywhere as long as you have cheap drinks. And then the other place that I do open mics, last little plug in, Luna Coffee House, which is where I met Freddy here.
Every Saturday.
Every Saturday at 9:00. And those people, though they're very lenient on time, I've gotten there a couple of times late, but they always start around 9:30, 9:45.
Every time
That's
I
the great
hosted,
thing about a coffee house. They know they're awake, damn it.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
awake.
yeah,
They know their
exactly.
shit. And the host there, he's really nice. Said he's always the one that's very like time. He'll tell you like, okay, you got about this much time. And yeah, over there we have a good set time and shit. But if you have any talents out there, even if it's pulling a nail out of your nose, I've met this guy. I think you know who I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
shout out to Filth.
Yeah, Phil. Phil or Filth?
Filth.
Filth.
Phil.
Gee, I was like,
dirty.
Jesus Christ, that guy actually, his name was Phil, and I was like, pretty normal fucking name for a guy that puts a nail in his nose.
Hi, I'm Phil. Here's my belt sander.
Yeah, here's me eating a light bulb.
Holy shit!
Yeah, but yeah, I do readings there, and that's about it. I mean,
You wanna throw out your social media real quick, or you don't want people to follow you? and
no,
shit?
dude, I have enough people. But yeah, I'll throw it out there. I have 2 pages. My Facebook, I have my personal and my poetry page. The Facebook is pretty much the same, Victor Manuel, or you can just look it up with Victor M and then just put PAR is Parlatto. Don't get it confused though, because if you put people, you'll find 2 Victor. You'll essentially find me and my uncle. And since my uncle passed away, he's not gonna add you, so don't go adding him.
Right.
He's the one with the Scarface picture, so that's why I always tell people, if you look up my name, make sure that you don't add the person with the Scarface photo.
Got it.
Do you have a public page?
Yes, and the poetry page is under the same name, or you can just look it up under the name facebook.com/Victor Manuel Parlatto, full name. Once you put that, it will take you straight to the page. Follow and like the page, and you'll be getting all the updates as I post the poem, because I know I post a lot of memes on my personal page, and all my poems get stuck in there somewhere.
Awesome. You want to give yours out?
You can find me at hatfieldstandup@gmail.com, as well as on Facebook and Twitter.
And you can find me at on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Freddy G. And real quick announcement. I don't know if people are hearing in Austin, or if you're ever in the Austin area, or you know anybody that lives in Austin. I happened to land 2 shows in Austin this coming week. Wednesday and Thursday. I'll be having 2 shows, and I shouldn't have said that because I forgot the fucking name of the venue. Son of a bitch.
You can tweet it out later.
I'll be sure to, if you follow me, Freddy G, on, like I said, on Twitter and Instagram, I'll definitely go ahead and put those out once I confirm the name of the venue again. It was given to me, but I forgot.
Twitter's a hell of a thing, man. It's like, fuck, I don't remember what I was going to say. Never mind, I remember. And you just Twitter that later.
that's I'll definitely do that. But I do have 2 confirmed shows. One's going to be on the 8th, and the other one's on the 9th. 2 different venues. I'll get back to you on the venues.
All right, and this episode should be coming out on Wednesday. So,
You sure?
yeah, it should be coming out Wednesday.
Okay.
Okay.
Sean says that it'll be coming out on Wednesday.
Okay, you
so-
guys have to understand. I'm like watching these 2 like Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday. Like it's just, and I'm just there in the middle, like, sure, guys. See, and you
like
guys still
Wimbledon.
can't see what I'm doing. And like I love that. I feel like there's a camera in front of me. I'm staring into space, like in the show The Office. Like I'm just like, all right, guys. Like the camera's right there. Like I'm supposed to be staring at it.
Yes, and also for the people that have been asking me, shout out to Joe. Joe's one of our faithful listeners. I'm pretty sure he's going to listen to this
Much love,
as well.
Joe.
And so, yes, we are working on the video aspect of this podcast. Just be a bit more patient. We're almost there. Just a bit more patient. We can't give you a date yet, but we're working on it.
We don't want to give you motherfuckers a timeline because you'll make us stick to it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the horrible thing about timelines. And if you guys are ready to see a sweaty Italian, well, that's exactly what's going to happen once this camera thing starts happening.
Okay. Also, if you want to get in touch with us, if you want to reach out, you can leave a comment on the YouTube page. We don't have a Facebook page up yet, but you can email us at bouncingbrainspodcast@gmail.com. And you can find the audio version of this podcast at shoutengine.com/bouncingbrains.
And until next time.
Thank you
Keep
very
it
much,
tight.
guys.
It's great to have you. Peace.